at my 6. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Homesteading Off the Grid. I got a really creepy story for you today, but first I want to give you an update on my virus status here. This is day 9 after first having symptoms. I'm counting last Monday when I took 3 multiple hour long naps. This is day 5, I guess, after having actually tested positive. I believe my wife dearly is a day or 2 ahead of me. Here's our update. As you can see, I'm getting the white back in my eyes. They're not all bloodshot and red. I don't look like I'm baked on the newly legalized stuff here in Virginia. Dearly is almost over it entirely. It's like we had mild symptoms, and then when it hit us hard in about 2 days, and that probably second or third day really sucked. I think I had a brain fever, but it's really, I'll get to that. And then recovery seemed to happen pretty much as sharply for us. This is our case and our experience. But now recovery seems to have leveled out. She's still coming across as if she has a common cold. That's kind of where I am now today. I feel better than I've felt since the plummet. I got out. I very, with restraint, stacked a little bit of firewood today just to be moving around a little bit. And I'm sorry. I didn't do anything yesterday. I haven't trained in 5 days. It's killing me. And so yesterday I didn't work out or do any sort of work outside. And that's the first day I've not done one or both in probably years. So it felt good today just to get out and get moving, but I didn't overdo it. I'm not nearly as exhausted. Actually, I would say I'm not even exhausted. I still feel a little tired. I did have a nap today, but it was only for an hour, not for 2 hours, and it was only one nap. I'm going to answer some questions you guys have been asking in the comment section, and I am getting to the creepy story I want to tell you. We're talking about treasure. People, 90% of the Civil War, the American Civil War, was fought within 90 miles of where I live. And somebody was talking the other day about Civil War treasure. This is a story about a couple of treasure hunters looking for Spanish gold in the Philippines. I met one of them. The other one was dead. And when you hear how that happened, you're going to cringe. It's totally a cringeworthy story. But this experience with the virus, I'm talking about from my standpoint, my wife's standpoint, hoping to help anybody it might help. Certainly not trying to alienate anybody. I have been amazed at how polarized this issue is just from the comment section of that video I made a couple days ago about this. There are people who never met me, I'll never meet them, but who hate my guts because of this thing. There are those who hate my guts because I was vaccinated. And somebody asked if I'd had the booster. No. Here's why. I was overconfident. I assumed that since I had been, fully vaccinated with the 2-dose regimen, and because of my overall good health, great health, my overall excellent fitness level, I was confident I didn't need the booster. This thing wouldn't get me. Well, this Omicron thing came over and it got me. I really believe in my soul that I'm getting through this much smoother than a lot of folks because of my fitness level and because of my health, because I'm active, because I go beyond exercise. Like I said, I actually train. And my wife as well. She exercises. She doesn't train, but she does exercise, and she has an active lifestyle, and I believe that's why she's getting through it as well. Will I go get the booster now that this thing has crept in? You can read. I've been following this stuff online. There's so much information, misinformation. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to contact my healthcare provider. I have an excellent doctor. He's been a doctor for longer than has he been? Probably about as long as I've been alive. I know he's delivered over 4,000 babies. So I'm going to ask him, and I'm going to follow his suggestions. So that's my answer to that one. And again, I'm not giving advice. I'm not qualified to do that. I am qualified, however, to share with you my experience. And that's what I'm doing. A lot of you in the comment sections have been, or in this comment section has been sharing your experience with me. And I appreciate that because I I'm questioning some things, and then I'm seeing that folks have been there and done that already, went through similar experiences. So it does help. Personally, I think it's great that we can even talk about this on social media now. I know a year ago, if I would have even mentioned it, they might have shut me down. I mean, that's just it. But I understand where they were coming from because of all the misinformation. People have asked how much I was paid to make that video. No one offered me any amount of money or any sort of compensation to share with you the experience I'm going through with this virus. That's insane. I'm amazed by how many people believe in the existence of Bigfoot, Sasquatch, but do not believe in the existence of this virus. That's been something amazing as well. So anyway, I'm not stunned, I'm not shocked, I'm not surprised. I've been working in social media for more than a decade. Other platforms, here on this one for 3 years. And what I know is that people can love you and worship the ground you walk on and tell you you're the greatest and you change their lives in a million ways. But the minute you make one piece of content that goes against something they disagree with, they will hate your guts. I think Eminem rapped about that in one of his songs. Sing On, the remake he did of Aerosmith's song. Yeah. So anyway, not trying to alienate anybody due to your beliefs, due to your experiences, due to however you're handling your health and your life. Just sharing mine with you. So, I do want to thank so many friends and so many neighbors and so many neighbors who are friends and friends who are neighbors, and actually some people I have business contacts with have been bringing by food, candy. It's been crazy. We have had up to 3 people per day every day since this happened to us text and offer to go get us stuff if we need anything, and we don't need anything because people are just bringing it anyway. So thank you to everybody. You know who you are. On to the story. And it is chilly out here, so this one might not be as long as most. And I am still, though I'm much better. I probably should get in and out of the cold here, and it will be dark before long. It was the issue of the Civil War that made me think of this, but then the Civil War treasure. But it was also, when I was going, and you guys, I'll tell you, there are some nutcases out there. You guys don't see them because these comments get held for review. There are nutcases going through there. Many of you who have left strong, supportive comments, sharing your experiences, they're going after you too, but you're not seeing it because the comments are held for review. And of course, I go in and I pray for them because these people are obviously miserable. I pray that God will bless them with the same health. Well, maybe not health as of like right now with the virus, but pre-virus health, wealth, and prosperity that our family has been so blessed with, because if people weren't miserable, I really don't think they would be so mean and nasty. So I say that prayer for them, and I mean it, and then I summarily ban them, but many of them are also being reported because it's just hate has no home here. And you're going to hate on somebody because of the choices they make. You claim, there should be no mandates, everybody should have a choice, but then you go after the people the way you're doing it who have made a choice that's different than your choice. Might want to check yourself before you rickety wreck yourself. Remember, every time you point the finger at someone, there's 3 pointing back at yourself. So stop walking around through the world feeling like you're being judged while all you do is walk around through this world judging. Okay, but that reminded me of this story too, because I thought, how great would it be to just not use the internet for a very extended period of time. I've done it before, like when I was living in other countries and didn't have access to it and stuff. And what I will tell you is it brought about emotional and mental peace, just can't be had if you use the internet. I use it as a livelihood and I keep it to a bare minimum. I've told people close to me this, and I'll tell you this right now. If Simon & Schuster were to offer me a multi-million-dollar contract for the rights to my books, I probably wouldn't do this anymore because just the nastiness. I don't know. It can be an ugly place. So I was in the Philippines. Well, I don't want to say what city I was in because I'll tell you what island I was on, and we need to protect people back there. Don't need to be making them targets for ransom. But I was at a bar one night, hanging out with some expats, and there was a guy there from Ireland hanging out with all the expats, and started small talking with him. I'd never met him before. And he explained to me that he had come into the city. This is one of the times in which we were living in a city. He'd come into the city to renew his visa. And I asked him where he lived, and don't worry. If anything, it's only a Bigfoot Sasquatch. It's not the coronavirus. Okay, so this guy was living like 7 hours south of the city in like the most remote part of this particular island. And he was a treasure hunter. Came up in the conversation, that's what he was doing down there. I asked him, you have a wife down there? He goes, well, yeah, he had met a woman down there that he fell in love with and he married her. But the main reason he went down there, it wasn't because of a girl, it was because he was a treasure hunter. And there's a ton of Spanish gold hidden all over the Philippines. Spain occupied the Philippines for 333 years until the U.S. liberated the Philippines from Spain. The Spanish-American War, 1898, occupied them in 1903. Then we left. They forced us out. But the gold became an issue during World War II because Japan knew it was there. And when they invaded the islands, everybody knows about the bombing of Pearl Harbor, right? Pearl Harbor got bombed. The very next day, the very next place that Japan bombed was Davao City, Philippines, down in Mindanao on the Bay of Davao, because they knew the Philippines and the U.S. were allies, and that's where the U.S. would go to launch, which was true. And then Japan, of course, would eventually take over the islands, and then the U.S. would liberate, with General MacArthur leading the charge, liberate the islands from the Japanese. Well, while the Japanese were there, they were looting and pillaging this old Spanish gold, and the Filipinos were, of course, hiding it. Those who had it were hiding it from the Japanese. They've got it hidden in caves, old mines. The country exists on the Pacific Ring of Fire, so they're very rich in precious metals, gold, silver, copper, zinc, iron ore, because of all the underwater volcanic eruptions, and of course those activities push those precious metals up to the surface. So stuff's everywhere. Actually, my wife Dearly's grandmother at one point owned a gold mine. She found some gold, but not enough. She never made a profit. She dumped a lot of money into her mining equipment and all that stuff. She never made it back. So anyway, I asked the guy, have you found any gold? And he, or any treasure. He's mentioned that if they go panning in the streams, they would find some. Not really enough to amount to anything, but what he was looking for was a lot of the old Spanish gold that the Filipino people hid as Japan was invading the islands. And he told me of a very strange case in which him and his partner, now deceased, and you'll soon understand why, had heard tale of a very large sum of gold, large sum of treasure, that people had a general idea of where it was, but they were afraid to go finding it, to seek it out and find it, because of what had happened to those who had gone before them in search of this treasure. So I asked him to please explain, do tell, and the story is this. This is a short version of it. Under Spanish colonialism, the Philippines had a system of feudalism. Even though today they are a democracy and they practice capitalism, on paper, in many areas of the country, feudalism is still kind of the general practice. There's no middle class. You've got the very wealthy, and then you've got the very poor. And for instance, when I lived out in the provinces, it was common that one of the haves might own hundreds of hectares. Now, they're on the metric system. We use acres here in the U.S. I think 1 hectare is about 2.5 acres. So some person might have, one family, like a dynasty, and this is just how it is, usually political dynasties. And that's largely how they acquire the land. They might have 400 or 500 hectares, which again is 1,000 acres. They would farm coconuts, bananas. If it's coastal, they have fisheries. And then the serfs, so to say, again, because we're comparing it to feudalism, would live on the land for free in exchange for doing the work required come harvest time. So, they could build their little huts, and they could take from the land everything they needed to eat and drink. Plenty of edible resources there as well. I mean, you can go, when the high tide comes in, you can go out with a net and stand in the water and just put your net down as the waves recede, and just catch enough fish in your net once or twice to feed your family for a day. It's really an amazing place. It's the perfect place for a bunch of people who don't really have much in the form of financial resources, because there's so much natural resources. It would be impossible to starve there, even if you didn't have $1 to your name or a pesos to your name. You can eat just about everything that grows. So that's how it worked. Just like, and it's still like that today. So the story that the treasure hunter told me was that just before the Americans went over and pushed Spain out there at the end of the Spanish-American War, after we'd routed Spain out of Cuba. Teddy Roosevelt started that war, if you didn't know. He was Assistant Secretary of the Navy at the time. This is not long before, but before he was president. And the Secretary of the Navy took leave for a week, and he put Teddy in charge. And there's a story that the man's secretary claimed that he said as he was on his way out the door. He said, "Oh, dear God, I fear that for the week I've put Roosevelt in charge, he's going to start a war." Sure enough, he did. Started the Spanish-American War down in Cuba. Went back out west, got his Rough Riders, rode up San Juan Hill, and became his, That sounded like tap, 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 multiple tree knocks and then a growl. Did you hear that? Again, don't worry. If anything, it's only potentially Bigfoot Sasquatch, not the virus. Another tree knock. Okay, so anyway, then they went around the world 9,000 miles, ran Spain out of the Philippines. So the story was, though, just before that happened, there was this mean, evil Spanish lord, Lord Cortez, ironically, which is my beautiful bride Dearly, a.k.a. Giggly Girl's maiden name, Cortez. He was mean. He was just, he limited what the people on his land could have, and he would check, and if they were taking more than they were rationed, he would do very mean things to them. And I'm hesitant to even say this because it's kind of gory, but he would skin their faces and send them home, and of course they would expire shortly thereafter. He was a very gory man, in love with himself, a big narcissist, multiple wives. Even though he didn't practice Islam, he just wanted multiple wives. So it wasn't for religious purposes, is what I'm saying. It was for selfish purposes. The guy, the only people that would be around him were his family, and even they couldn't stand the guy because he was so mean and he was so brutal. And the story goes that when he finally did die of old age, he was like 80, his family left the estate, the hacienda, they called it, which is like the Spanish version of a plantation. Though it was feudalism, not enslavement. So the locals at first thought this was a great thing because, number one, all the free resources they wanted now. Coconuts, bananas, the fish on the coast, but most importantly and most namely, the gold. They knew the old man was worth a fortune. They knew he had wealth. He used to show off his gold. A lot of times he'd go around inspecting the villages, making sure people weren't taking more than they were allotted by him, and he'd be flipping his gold coins, and people's mouths would be watering at sight at him. And of course, he'd never give any away. So the story also goes that the family had a mausoleum on their property. Remember, the Spanish, by tradition, don't bury their dead underground. They bury them above ground, which doesn't make sense. If you're above ground, you're not buried. They are interned above ground in like cement coffins. Well, this family had a mausoleum. The guy had had this thing built many years before his death, and he had this super large concrete tomb in which his body was to be placed. Well, it took a few years, but after a while, somebody got it in their head, hey, this gold, this fortune, either the family took it all with them when they left because they couldn't stand the place because of all the memories of all the terrible things he'd done, or if they had left it behind, or if it had been hidden, it's probably in his tomb with him, because the tomb where the body was placed was not, inside the mausoleum. It wasn't the size of, say, a normal coffin. It was big enough for 4 people, and he was not a big man. So 2 guys, this would have been after the Spanish-American War, but before World War II, before Japan went in. The story goes the 2 local villagers got it in their minds that fortune was in that mausoleum, and it was in the coffin with the body, and that they were going to go get it. Everybody told them no. They said the land is cursed due to all the evil things this guy did. You're crazy if you go there. Don't do it. So they waited until night, just because, if you're up to no good, doesn't it always feel a little safer to do it under the cover of darkness? I thought I heard voices. Okay, so under the cover of darkness, by the light of a full moon, they went to the hacienda. They went to where the home place was. They found the mausoleum. They broke in. They very slowly began to slide the lid off of the casket. The villagers down below them were waiting outside, listening, and they heard 2 terrifying screams. Screams like they'd never heard. It was the 2 men that had gone, and they sounded as if they were in some sort of pain, the like that cannot even be imagined. And then all went silent. They heard nothing else that night, and those 2 men didn't return. The next day, a very small search party of men went out to find them. They went looking for them. They found them just outside the mausoleum. They could see where the gate of the mausoleum had been broken open, and the coffin lid was just a little bit slid off, just a little teeny tiny bit. The men were laying face down, immobile, about 10 or 15 yards outside the mausoleum. When they were turned over, they were missing the skin on their faces. They were dead. So this story then got passed down for the next century. So the guy that's telling me this story at the bar that night in the city said that he and his partner, another Irishman, they had been friends back in Ireland, got wind of this story. And of course, in their Western minds, they thought, every nationality, every different location around the world has their own forms of superstition, and that's all this is. I like the one Irish, the horse. What do you call that? There's some kind of horse. Which is funny because in the Philippines they have another similar creature called is it a tikbalaran? It's in the book Isle of Capri that I wrote. I researched it heavily. Very similar creature. So anyway, they thought, oh, the only thing that could be to this story would be the treasure in that tomb. Certainly no ghosts, there's no curses, treasure in the tomb. So they start making a plan to go get it. They were told where it was, and supposedly they couldn't believe that for the past 100 years since this original story started, that no one had gone up there looking for this thing, because the locals believed that story to be truth. So they were hatching their plans, and one night, well, look who's there. Hey, kitty, what you doing? She must have heard it too. So one night, they're sitting around drinking, talking about how much treasure might be up there. And this guy's partner, the one who's no longer among the living, decides he's going to go up there and he's going to go get this treasure now. He's not going to wait. I'm going to take this off the tripod here in case we see something moving around back there. And his buddy's like, no, wait, let's do it during the day for one thing. Let's do it when we're sober for another. You know, this, if we hit the big jackpot here and this could be it. We could go back to Ireland and live like kings, etc., etc. Well, his buddy just didn't want to wait, and he staggered off out of there drunk. He said he tried to go with him, but he knew he was too drunk to even make it through the forest without, I heard a howl, without banging his head up against a coconut tree and getting knocked the F out. So he let his friend go, assuming he'd just be back soon enough anyway, or he'd pass out drunk in the jungle. And at that time, he passed out himself and woke up the next morning to shrieks and screams. The sounds of terror. Pure, total terror. He went outside, his big head throbbing, and all the villagers, well, several that were there, were gathered around a body lying face down just outside of the jungle. It was his partner, and he walks over, the body's turned over, the man is dead, and there's no skin on his face whatsoever. So the man who told me the story said he has every reason to believe that his partner had made it to that tomb and had started to slide the lid off of that coffin. There may or may not be treasure in that coffin, but there's certainly something else, something this guy didn't want any part of. And he said he will join the locals and never, ever go into that mausoleum to see if he can find that treasure in that tomb. Cleopatra says it's time to go, and I just heard another howl. So, with all that said, thank you for being here. Thank everybody for your support. If you want to hate on me because of my personal choices, feel free. But I will never do you the luxury of hating you back. It's too much of that in this world. Be kind to each other, okay? It's Christmas. See you next time.